In this special edition of the Empowering Workplaces podcast, I'm on the beat and reporting from the WorkHuman conference in San Diego. Welcome to Empowering Workplaces, a show for everyone who wants to make work better and more fulfilling. We are your hosts, culture designer Maddie Grant and organizational psychologist Sonia Lucina. Join us in today's awesome conversation. All right. Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for joining me with Empowering Workplaces.
Thanks, Maddie. Great to be here.
I would love you to introduce yourself for our listeners. Tell me who you are and why you're here.
Yeah, sure. Name is Tom Libretto. I'm the president of WorkHuman, and we are a company. We're actually at our event today.
Yes.
But we're a company that focuses on bringing social recognition and well-being to every company on the planet.
So I understand, and tell me if this is correct, that WorkHuman used to be called Globoforce. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
And so that there's a bit of a story behind the shift to the new, not new anymore, but the new name and all of that. Can you tell me a little bit about that background?
Sure. A few years ago, we actually took the name of the conference that we're at right now, WorkHuman Live, and had to think about how powerful the combination of the two words are, work and human, and really, introspectively thought about our mission as an organization, and those two things locked together, and we determined that has to be the name of the company going forward.
Well, I love that. I really do. I actually used to have a consulting firm called Human Workplaces.
Oh, there you go.
I'm right there with you. Of course, then got acquired and name changed, but such as that. So, in terms of the core sort of reason for being for WorkHuman, obviously recognition is really important. Was that a specific choice kind of at the same time as this brand, the rebrand, or were you already very focused on recognition before that?
Yeah, no, we've been in business as a really is an employee engagement platform for a couple of decades now. Regardless of the name of the company.
Yeah.
And our purpose, as I said, is around bringing humanity to the workplace. We fundamentally believe, and the science backs it up, that as employees feel more engaged, more energized, more seen, more validated, more recognized, that just leads to outstanding, phenomenal success for companies across virtually every metric, be it a business metric, a hard business metric, a soft emotional metric, the full Monty, so to speak. So, we're passionate in our belief that raising humans within the workplace environment is what business leaders around the world should be focusing on at all times.
So it's interesting because I think I've talked to a lot of people over the years about engagement, and engagement specifically as an outcome of a great culture,
right? Not
necessarily the driver of a great culture. But it seems that in your work, maybe it's both. Do you have a reaction to that?
Yeah, many organizations, we ourselves measure engagement. It usually happens on a biannual or annual basis, and it's really a look back. Look in the rearview mirror of the things that we've put in place to better communicate, offer greater clarity to our human beings at work, and particularly, do they feel validated, recognized, uplifted, and safe from a well-being perspective? Do we see that come to fruition in a measurement like engagement? So we think that we know that there is a very causal, relationship between people being recognized and being seen and being uplifted at work, and ultimately then that being measurable in something like engagement.
Yeah. So how do you combat the possibility that people just want to game the system and get their points and go up the leaderboard? And I mean, is it authentic, do you think, generally speaking?
Excuse me. There's Yeah, there are a bunch of dimensions to that. So over the course of our, of the last 20 plus years, we've evolved the platform to account for, that gamesmanship, or in some cases, just outright fraudulent use of a platform. So there's lots of controls and configuration that can be put into the system, so to speak, so that there are, the recency and frequency of engagement is authentic and genuine, and that, there are caps either from a budget and a spend perspective, or from a giving and a receiving perspective. We also ourselves believe that there really can never be too much recognition. And that there you ask people the two-part question, are you recognized too little? And most people raise their hand and say yes. You ever ask the question, have you been recognized too often? No one no one thinks that is ever the case. But like I said, we have loads and loads of controls in place for organizations to really monitor the authenticity of those recognition moments across their enterprise.
Well, and one of the reasons I was asking that question is I was trying to think of, what are the objections to this? Because there must still be prospects where you have to convince them of the value of doing this, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had the opportunity to sit down and speak with the CEO of Gallup, who's done a ton of research in this area alongside, in partnership with us. And we thought back together on the John Doerr concept of you measure what matters.
Right.
And most businesses take that to mean productivity per employee, revenue growth, profit growth, expense management, sort of the hardcore classic business metrics or KPIs. If you pull that thread a little bit and ask the question, well, measure what matters, are you saying therefore that happiness in the workplace doesn't matter because you don't measure it? And it's a bit of a profound wake-up call, I think, for business leaders to think about this, not in terms of, hey, it's not something that hits the priority list because we can't tie it directly to one of those classic economic or quantifiable business metrics that we measure as routine. And we're really on a mission to compel them to measure other things that matter and are directly causal and impactful to those classic business metrics. So the long answer to that question is, it is intuitive, and and we're on a mission to convince people that this is real, and it's something that they do need to prioritize.
It's funny, you're really preaching to the choir, because I actually have a very similar conversation with people around culture management, which I feel like can have metrics associated. So for example, we'll talk to organizations that are trying to be more innovative, and do they actually measure how many experiments they try?
Right.
And it's so true. You measure what matters, and it's interesting how people don't necessarily connect those dots because they think this stuff is squishy and just hard to measure.
Yeah.
But it is measurable.
No, I think we're starting to see that that inflection point where business leaders are throwing up their hands. They've tried lots of things, and this little sort of dark corner of HR being inundated with try this, try that, and really nothing working in terms of the addressing the rise in dissatisfaction of employees with their working environment. We're at that inflection point of this is going to flip to mainstream. There's really no other solution. So,
speaking of mainstream, which is not yet, but AI, I have to ask you the AI question.
Sure.
Do you think, clearly it's going to have an impact on everything and everybody, right? Mm-hmm. What's your take on the future of WorkHuman and just the work that you're doing with recognition? Like, do you see some impacts already?
Oh, for sure. I think AI as a concept has been around for many, 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 many years.
Yeah.
And there are aspects of AI and algorithmic improvement to virtually everything that we interact with, every system at work, every system, within our personal lives. So it's not a new concept. I think the with ChatGPT and generative AI, it now has an interface that people can interact with for the first time, and that is raising lots of questions just because it's now more aware and in the open. My point of view is that every technological step change that we've ever encountered, be it the PC or the internet, has been additive to the experience, whether that be a personal experience or a professional experience. And I think AI is going to be no different. So the things that we're attempting to infuse within our recognition platform experience and leveraging some of these new technologies is about overcoming some of the obstacles that prohibit people from recognizing each other. And if we can do that in a eminently human way using AI, which may sound like a contradiction, but it's really not. We can give people more power, and ultimately we'll see that we'll see the recency and frequency of recognition moments take off from there.
Yeah, I love that you said that it's additive, because I totally believe that too. Yeah. It'll make us be better humans, I think.
Yeah, right on.
In the long term. So final thought, just in terms of more human workplaces, and of course the podcast is called Empowering Workplaces. What do you think an individual can do? Like, we've talked a lot about organizations and tools and technologies, but as an individual employee and or job seeker, what should they be looking for? Yeah,
I think the power of recognition is that it is an individual thing. So we prescribe to the philosophy that as an individual, you have the power to thank someone. And in doing so, you lift yourself, not just the receiver of that thanks. And we're big believers that movement starts at the individual level. It's not a top-down thing. Those types of rubrics don't work very well. But if you enfranchise individuals at the collective level, that's where a real change begins to happen.
Well, I love that. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So my name is Khalil Smith. I'm the Vice President of Inclusion, Diversity, and Engagement at a 10,000 person company called Akamai Technologies. So most of your listeners probably have not heard of us, but they've probably experienced us. So we do really kind of three big pillars. One is content distribution. So things like streaming the World Cup all over the world and working with partners to make sure that information is getting from one place to the next. Another is cybersecurity. So working with a lot of institutions to make sure that data is protected and secure. And then things like when you go to buy an Xbox or a PlayStation 5, that there are humans buying those and not bots kind of taking up all of that. And then the last is really around cloud computing. So making sure that organizations can get all of their great content into the cloud and make it accessible and easy to use.
So not important.
No, not at all. Yeah, no, definitely.
not even.
Who uses the internet, really? I mean, who needs a fast, safe, and secure internet, right?
Exactly. So what brings you to WorkHuman?
It's just an incredible conference with amazing people from all over that are doing a lot of the same type of work that I am. So human resources professionals and folks that are, focused on total rewards and compensation and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you name it. And some of the best and brightest people are here, kind of crafting their trade and learning about everyone else. And then I also have the express pleasure of being a part of two different events. So I'm on a panel with a handful of folks, and we're talking about kind of the future of work and things that are going on in that space. Exactly. And then I'm also in a bit of a breakout where I'll be talking about something that I affectionately refer to as the Marvel model. So
okay, well, I want to ask you about that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yes. Before we get to that, DE&I.
Yeah.
Why do we select startups?
It's a great question, and I think in large part, I don't know that the conversation will ever go away, much in the same way that we continue to talk about finance and operations and strategy and leadership. Some of these are just baked into how businesses operate and what we do. I think the question is, why are we still making the business case for it?
Right,
And so that's the big challenge, is that, a lot of this goes against how we have traditionally operated businesses. And a lot of it goes against the way that we are pre-wired, right? And so if we go back from an evolutionary standpoint, we're wired to want to be around people like us, people that look like us, people that think like us.
The fallacy of culture.
For sure, absolutely, versus culture add. And we're not necessarily wired for organizations of 10,000 people like my company or 100,000 people like a lot of other companies. And so, but similarly, we're also not wired to fly on airplanes and to be on the internet and do a lot of other things that are a part of our day-to-day now. And so we need to evolve, and we need to evolve quickly, because the more we expand this pool, the better off we are.
So are you still making the business case, or is it more about the how and the why?
I think it depends on who you're talking to. So, every year McKinsey comes out with new data. Every year Deloitte comes out with new data. They're not doing that because people are sold. They're doing that because, and quite honestly, in a lot of ways, we don't quite know how we define diversity yet. It's continuing to change. And so for a while it was gender and ethnicity. And then we said, wow, actually gender is a lot more fluid than we've been thinking about it. And by the way, we also want to consider age and socioeconomic background, because
just in case you thought you'd figured it out.
That's exactly it. And so that's why we continue to talk about it. But I think the question of does it matter is one that we need to replace with how does it matter? And so that's part of the pivot that I expect to see from the leaders that I surround myself with, for the same reason that, we don't relitigate why finance is important. Why do we care about margins? Why do we care about operations? What we should be asking is, how do we care about that? How does it fit into our overarching strategy? And so margins are important, but do we need to make capital expenditures this year? And so margins are going to be down a little bit. That's a more nuanced conversation, and one that I expect us to be having about things like our human resources.
It's funny, your whole metaphor is exactly how we talk about culture management, that it should be a thing. It's not something that everybody's going to be doing 100% of the time, but somebody should be paying attention
For sure.
at some point, all the way, all through the
For sure, and in the best organizations, it's woven into everyone's role and responsibility, but they're still stewards, right? And so again, you look at a company like Walmart that has said, okay, we are financially stable. We take pens from meetings so that we don't have to buy them separately. They still have a finance team. They still have people that are saying, okay, we're going super deep. We're the subject matter experts, but it's woven into everything they do. Southwest Airlines has folks that are focused on the customer experience and their strategy, but it's woven into everything that they do and how they think about their customer and employee experience. So this should be the same way, is that I am fortunate to spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week thinking about diversity and inclusion and employee engagement and work. I've got wonderful peers and partners that are thinking about, where do we need to put servers, and where do we need to, build our next facility, and how are we going to, grow capacity. Those are not my wheelhouse, and so I don't want them thinking about this work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. I want it woven into what they believe it is to be a great leader, because if you can only lead people that come from a similar background or have a similar point of view, I would argue you're not a good leader. And that's not what we are expecting. We're expecting folks to figure out, how do I broaden the pool, open the aperture, bring more people in, but to think that it will all of a sudden become something that we don't need to focus on or don't need to pay attention to, I think is probably a bit of a misdirection.
But I love this conversation because actually it's like being a generalist, right? And we need deep expertise in culture, in D&I, and all these different things. But we also need everybody to have a bit of a broad, general understanding of
Absolutely. And it's skin in the game, right? I think in a lot of ways sometimes we continue to think about diversity again, from a gender and ethnicity standpoint, when we think about disability. Right? The fact that, and we've got a wonderful employee resource group called our InReach employee resource group, and part of what they convey to folks is all of us are one instance away from taking advantage of some of the same benefits and policies and procedures that we've put in place to support that community. And so all of a sudden someone breaks their arm and they can't open the door the same way they used to. Now they recognize why it's important. As our parents are aging, as our communities are aging, there are these things that for a while we thought, well, bias was only about those people, and I'm not one of them, so I don't understand how it impacts me. Ideally, we'd be able to move to a space where we're just doing it because we believe that it's right for the business, it's right for all of these other elements, but barring all of that, there's still a sense of, at one point it will be. At one point I will be older than the general population, and people will look and say, can Khalil still do the job? Like, he's not as nimble as he used to be. That is a part of bias. And so when we can identify that and mitigate for it, we actually make sure that I can have an even better experience in the long term.
So you're saying we don't need to wait until you have direct experience yourself of bias, which I'm sure you've had already. But
I hope not.
Right?
I mean, for someone to say I don't support parental leave because I'm not a parent, or to say I don't support paid time off because I don't want to take vacations, I think that's a very myopic way of looking at the world. And I do think that there will always be some balance, and this is probably one of my least popular perspectives, is that we will never completely erase bias, right? And so there's an element of, okay, so if we remove resume characteristics or remove names from resumes, there may be someone that worked incredibly hard to go to a really challenging school that says, whoa, wait a second, you're not looking at schooling anymore? Now that's a bit of a bias against me. I think what we need to be cautious about is weaponizing that in any direction and saying, you either are or aren't inclusive. I don't believe it's a light switch. I believe it's a dial, and you can be more or less inclusive depending on what's going on, but that's why it's never done, because for a while we thought, okay, we've looked at a bunch of these dimensions and we still haven't hit them, to be clear, so let's not move on. But now we've added a bunch more dimensions and said, well, we need to keep looking at this. And some folks are talking about remote as another dimension of diversity. So are people who work remotely getting promoted and rewarded at a similar rate as the people that go into the office? There are all these different dimensions and things that are going on, and for some that can be really confusing or frustrating because they want to nail it and then just kind of move on to the next thing. That's not how business works, and quite honestly, it's not how most of the things in life work. You don't exercise, get fit, and then say, whew, done. All right, we're good, right? Exactly. You also, I'm a parent of 2 boys, a 23-year-old and a 12-year-old. There will never be a point where I say, whew, I'm done. Right? There are kind of markers and milestones where you say, all right, you're 18, that's a milestone, or you graduated university, if you wind up going, that's a milestone, or you moved out of the house, that's a milestone. And hopefully we're building some of those milestones in at work as well, so that we can see progress. But I don't think it ever stops.
Well, Maddie, my name is Peter Church. I lead human resources at Point 32 Health, which is based just outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
Awesome. And what is your interest in WorkHuman?
Well, a couple different things. First and foremost, in the organization I'm in today, as we think about creating a more inclusive workforce, a purpose-driven organization, how we think about the whole person, how we think about, at the risk of sounding a little cliche, putting the human back in human resources. This is such an important part about how we approach curating a culture and building an organization that is purpose-driven. WorkHuman focuses quite a bit on the importance of recognition and putting a spotlight on not only praise, but also just gratitude and thanks.
So WorkHuman is all about more human workplaces, like you were just saying. And this podcast is called Empowering Workplaces. So we basically care about the same exact kind of stuff. So I'm just curious to hear, what does an empowering workplace look like for you?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that's been so important in our organization, particularly over the course of the past year, we all come out of the pandemic facing new challenges. We all are working through the heaviness of the things that exist in the outside world, and we're all trying to balance the things that consume our minds and our hearts outside of work, but we're also trying to do good work. So curating and really supporting a work environment where people can thrive, people can contribute in ways that are the best that they can do, that's a key priority for us right now. So when we think about how does the human resources function, support the business, part of it's around building capabilities and empowering our colleagues to do different things. Some of those things include gratitude, recognition. Some of them are around well-being. And ultimately, it's around an inclusive work environment where diverse points of view, diverse experiences can come and thrive and make us better.
Yeah. So Empowering Workplaces, the podcast, is we always like to think about whatever topic at hand from the perspective of the organization and the company, and also the individual worker, maybe the individual job seeker. Would you have advice for that individual? You've already talked about, the organization and what we can do, as companies, but what about as individuals to be more empowered specifically?
Well, I guess one way I like to think about this is it's real important for individuals to know, what makes you tick? In the context of an open job market, not every company is for everybody. It's one of the reasons why I think it's important for companies to be crystal clear and abundantly clear with what their purpose is, because the intrinsic draw for someone to want to work somewhere has an awful lot to what the company's essence is. So that greater level of self-awareness, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And we do look for that in our organization. I also think it's real important for individuals to understand what they can give in time and commitment. Some roles in some organizations require more. Some are more demanding. Some leverage skills differently. Some offer hybrid work environments, and not everybody thrives in a hybrid work environment. Mm-hmm. So increased levels of self-awareness, that's a big part of what we're looking for these days. But I'll tell you what is also important is organizations being able to offer an array of things that allow people to bring their best selves.
Yeah, I love that. We call that organizing your workforce to suit the needs of the employees. So having the ability to connect with all kinds of different individuals and all the different ways that they want to work and do their best work specifically.
It's doing the best work. I think if I were to go back in time over the past couple years, while there are certain things that are hot topics today, they've been with us for a long time. I think what the past several years have allowed us to do is become more organizationally aware, more culturally aware of the needs of a very, very different workforce than one we had before. Part of that might be the multi-generational workforce. Mm-hmm. Part of it might be the important needs of a caregiver. And I'll tell you, one of the things that is particularly important for our organization today, and one of the things that we're trying to be increasingly mindful of, is what are the impacts of caregiving on the worker, and how can we be even more supportive and provide a broader array of support tools to help caregivers, because their work is never done, and it's not bound by the constraints of a shift.
Well, I feel that because I'm in that generation that's in between, right? I have an aging parent. I've lost one already, and then still have my kids. So I definitely feel that. It's
I'll tell you what is so fascinating is as I've gotten older and I look at the responsibilities, I think we probably share similar challenges. You've got your work you need to do during the course of the day, but then there's the outside of work, which on average runs anywhere from an additional 8 to 12 hours a week for the average caregiver. There's additional discretionary income that's going out that's not reimbursable related to medical expenses. So the financial toll, the mental toll, the physical toll it takes on an individual is enormous. And so, at any company, you're going to have state laws and federal laws that provide a certain amount of job protection for time off, but it's more than that. It's a certain degree of compassion. It's a certain degree of organization flexibility, but it's other things that the purchasing power of an organization can do and bring to people, whether it's caregiving concierge or even networking around how to become a caregiver and manage through the caregiving process. That's an enormous weight that impacts today's worker perhaps not that much differently than it has in the past, but our social awareness to the
I was going to say there's a huge amount, at least in my view, of more awareness and more discussion of this topic, right? You must feel pretty hopeful.
I do feel hopeful. I do. I think it's important. I think it's important for all of us to reflect on what the pandemic years have taught us.
Yeah.
I mean, in the spirit of every generation has certain events that it marks its lives by. My parents' generation would have been John F. Kennedy and Vietnam War, and some significant political turmoil in the early 70s. And my generation is defined by 9/11 and the COVID era.
Yeah.
And I'll certainly never think the same again, but it's really important for us not to waste the lessons of a burning platform and to bring those things forward.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I think for us, there's this window that's been opened, right? The sort of silver lining. And it's on us to keep the conversation going, to keep these topics top of mind, to not let that window close, and to really use it to bring forth the more human workplace that we all really want.
Well, I'll tell you what, when the majority of us all went home 3 years ago, we took away the physicality of what is work and what is home, which means that we allowed for at-home conversations to take place in a workplace. And I think once that opportunity has opened up, we have a responsibility to continue to bring forward the best of those lessons.
Yeah, well, I think that's a perfect way to end our conversation. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.